in nature. And, you know, were his comments incendiary? Well, some of them, yeah, without a doubt. But, I mean, I've seen much worse on an almost daily basis. I see posts and comments on Facebook that are direct threats to Obama every single day. But this guy's obviously being targeted for a reason. He's a veteran. We know that the DHS is engaged in this smear campaign against returning veterans. They're trying to demonize them all, characterize them all as domestic extremists and terrorists, and he's been caught in this dragnet. So he's been moved to a psychiatric facility 3 hours away from his family and legal team, opposite end of the county where this is supposed to be taking place. And the justice in the case dismissed efforts to stop this. There were lawyers from the Rutherford Institute that tried to stop him being transferred. The justice dismissed it. He's gone. People having trouble getting in contact with him now, which is the latest I read on Facebook. But we were actually contacted by a supporter of Rao who spoke with his brother and shared the following concern, which is in this article. Quote, "It would seem that in the government's infinite wisdom, especially in a time of obscenely massive deficits, that they are going to send him to a Veterans Administration medical centre. That doesn't sound too bad now, does it? How about this then? The hospital that they're sending him to is not the one 8 miles away from his home in Richmond, but it's instead on the other side of the Commonwealth of Virginia in Roanoke. One question, why? This makes absolutely no sense when you consider that since he was arrested or committed in Chesterfield, that this is the court of record and the court that is supposed to hear his case at every motion and hearing. Why are they trying to take him so far away from his home? It's almost like they're trying to make him disappear. Oh no, not our benevolent nanny state government, never." So the fear now amongst his supporters is that people are having trouble getting in contact with him. His legal team, his family are 3 hours away, and basically now they're saying he's not even in that facility. So God knows where they've taken him. But again, the whole story is about this lurch towards the Sovietization of America, because as we know, historically, of course, under the Soviet system of Psy-Kushkas, these political dissidents were labeled mentally ill, they were kidnapped, they were incarcerated in psychiatric prisons, and the primary purpose of why that was done, of course, was, one, to isolate dissidents from the other, you know, political activists, but also to denigrate their ideas. It was to communicate with the rest of the population that criticism of the state will not be tolerated, and that it's a mental illness to even suggest that the official story behind everything isn't the case. And this is precisely what's happening to Brendan Rao. But if the reaction I've seen just over the past few days is anything to go by, then the outpouring of support is going to make this blow up in the government's face, just like the arrest of the Hutari militia members, which of course was hailed at the time as a huge coup in the fight against domestic extremism. A few months later, of course, the feds had to skulk off with their tails between their legs because they were all acquitted. They'd committed no crime. There were a few minor firearms offences, but the whole plot to kill police officers and start a domestic revolution, violent revolution, completely collapsed, government egg on its face, and they just keep walking into these same situations again and again. He hasn't committed an act of violence. He hasn't been charged with any crime. You know, are there lone nutcases out there who might commit violence? Well, undoubtedly. But who's been provocateuring, nurturing every major domestic terror plot in the United States over the last 10 years, as even the New York Times now admits? Well, it's the FBI. So, you know, when the FBI tells us to be all concerned and fearful about some Facebook posts in the context of terrorism, while they're creating and overseeing all the major terror plots in America, you know, I just don't want to hear it. It's ridiculous. So more updates on the Brendan Raub story, if we get them. Now, he seems to have been disappeared. More updates as they come in. Moving on, man kicked off flight over anti-TSA shirt. This is my article on PRISONPLANET.com, also linked on the Drudge Report today. A man and his wife were treated as potential terrorists and kicked off a Delta Airlines flight over a satirical T-shirt because it made passengers and employees feel very uncomfortable. Writing on his blog, Arjit Guha describes how he was flying out of Buffalo Niagara Airport after attending his wife's grandfather's funeral. Having passed through security without a problem, Guha was approached by a Delta agent who informed him that his attire was making passengers nervous. And basically, he's wearing a T-shirt with a TSA logo. You can see it in the article, which satirizes the, paranoid and overbearing approach to security that has come to categorize that federal agency. And you can go and read the entire account at INFOWARS.com. But the bottom line to come out of this is, questioning authority is now treated not only as a suspicious activity, but as an actual indication that you're a terrorist. He passes through security. He has his bag searched over and over again. He even agrees to remove the T-shirt, but still, that's not good enough. Because he dared to question the authorities, and that means he must be punished. He's a thought criminal. He must pay for that, as an example to everybody else. And so Delta Airlines supervisors, transit police and TSA basically subjected this guy to interrogation, drug dogs, the whole 9 yards. And then they ask him, where does the T-shirt come from? And he tells them, well, it was a gift from my brother. Where does he live? Michigan. And this illustrates how dumb these airport security people are. They literally must hire them based on their low IQ, because they didn't even recognize the word Michigan. This is seriously out of the story. Here's the quote. Where'd he move from? Michigan, I respond. Michigan? What's that? She says. This is the transit police. At this point, the main TSA agent who questioned me earlier interjected. The TSA were actually the intelligent ones in this exchange. He said, Michigan. Unable to withhold my snark, I responded with an eye-rolling sneer. You've never heard of Michigan? This response did not please her partner, a transit cop named Mark. Mark grabbed his walkie-talkie and alerted his supervisor and proceeded to request that he be granted permission to question me further in a private room. His justification? Quote, first he hesitated, then he gave a stupid answer. Michigan, my friends, is a stupid answer. So because these cops were so dumb, they couldn't comprehend what the word Michigan meant, that itself was taken as another sign that this guy was acting suspiciously and that he couldn't get on the plane. And then they cited the fact that his wife, who was with him, did not take his last name when they got married. So apparently, according to Delta Airlines and the transit police there in this airport, Buffalo Niagara Airport, if you're married and your wife doesn't take your surname, that's also a sign of potential terrorism right there. And you will be treated as a terrorist for that. And then we actually come to discover that the initial reason, the primary reason for him being identified as a threat was, you guessed it, he opted out of the radiation firing naked body scanners. And we've, of course, covered stories before where people who are actually knowledgeable about the, the massive health risk posed by the scanners are then subjected to extra special harassment for their thought crime. And it was actually, in this case, the pilot who eventually kicked him off of the flight. They had to get another flight the next morning because he said his presence, this guy's presence for wearing an anti-TSA T-shirt would have upset the other passengers. So the fact that he had a brain and was able to use it to construct his own thoughts, that was seen as a massive security risk. It was a threat. It was a threat to the other, castrated sheeple who were sitting there trembling on the plane, nervous because some guy's got a political T-shirt on. I mean, give me a break. So remember, being able to think is now a security threat. Having a political opinion is a security threat. Having a wife who doesn't take your last name is a security threat. Opting out of a body scanner is a security threat. And your right to mobility will be eviscerated, as it was in this case. He missed the flight. If you dare to act like anything other than a lobotomized zombie, just make sure you're wearing the right T-shirt, because it could make people very nervous. TSA again here. Surprise, surprise, another TSA story. TSA rifles through bags, conducts pat-downs at Paul Ryan event. For some time we've been warning, this is Steve Watson, INFOWARS.com. For some time we've been warning that TSA is systematically moving beyond the nation's airports and conducting operations on the streets of America. The latest example of this kind occurred at an event organised by Mitt Romney's GOP running mate, Paul Ryan, this past weekend in the Villages, Florida. The Shark Tank blog reports that the TSA officers showed up alongside Secret Service and local Sumter County Sheriff's Office and proceeded to do what they do like nobody else does. So they had 6 TSA agents out there at this Paul Ryan political event conducting grope downs and bag searches. I think the Department of Homeland Security needs to be reminded of what the TSA actually stands for, what those 3 letters stand for. Transportation Security Administration. The key word there being transportation. What the hell has a Paul Ryan political event got to do with transportation? You know, what has TSA workers conducting grope downs at prom nights got to do with transportation? Nothing. But for all those people who, you know, just for years lazily sat back and said, well, I don't fly, so I don't need to worry about it. Well, look where that attitude's got us now. You know, TSA agents riding on buses in Houston interrogating people as to their destinations, train stations, ferry ports, highways, bus depots. You know, last month they even sent TSA agents, because they were doing such a great job, they sent them over to London for the Olympics. And it's an occupying army of goons. It's a literal occupation force throughout America now. In Nazi Germany, these kind of people wore brown shirts, but, you know, for the TSA, the colour of tyranny is blue. So the battle against the TSA goes on. Of course, we had this poll a few weeks ago. The majority of Americans are happy with it. They're happy with this gaggle of perverts prone to criminal behaviour groping their children. So there's a lot of morons, there's a lot of zombies that need to be kicked out of their slumber. And until they are, we're just going to see more and more stories like this as the TSA expands its presence, its occupying presence across the United States. Moving on to global news now. Syrian rebels try to use prisoner for suicide bombing. BBC News. The New York Times has released a video which shows 3 Syrian army rebels trying to use a prisoner as an unwitting suicide bomber, as the BBC's Gordon Kadera reports. Let's go to the clip.
A bomb being prepared on the back of a truck. The target, a nearby Syrian government checkpoint. The group call themselves the Lions of Tawhid and say they'll accept nothing less than the end of the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. At their base, the group have a prisoner. They say he's a member of the Shabiha militia and he's told that he'll be released as part of a prisoner exchange. Blindfolded, he's driven towards the city. He's told all he'll have to do is drive the truck towards a government checkpoint. What he doesn't know is the truck is the one that's been rigged with a 300-kilo bomb. The rebel fighters intend to detonate it remotely when he approaches the checkpoint. He's being tricked into being an unwitting suicide bomber.
So there you have it. Barack Obama, with his recent announcement, is using your taxpayer dollars to fund Syrian rebels who use prisoners as unwitting suicide bombers. These are the good guys now. These are who we're supporting. Rah, rah, rah. It's the war on terror. We're supporting and funding the actual terrorists, but let's not talk about that. And what's interesting is this story's actually been deleted from the BBC News website. It's down the memory hole, gone. It's still up on their YouTube channel. How long it stays there is anyone's guess, but it seems somebody's trying to pull the plug on it. And I love how the BBC spins it in the clip. It's like, oh yeah, sure, he's